As the night falls and the world grows silent, the guardians of our buildings, the doormen, remain alert. While most of us rest, they watch, they listen, and sometimes they witness things no one should ever see. The job of a doorman may seem simple, but some of them have experienced things that defy explanation. Tonight, for doormen share their most chilling encounters, things they've seen in the shadows, things that shouldn't be possible. These are stories you won't forget, because sometimes the night holds more than just silence. Story 1. The Visitor Who Never Left. I've worked as a doorman in an old building for over 5 years. It's not a glamorous job, but it's a steady one. The building is quiet, for the most part. Most tenants keep to themselves, and we only get a few late-night deliveries here and there. But one night, something happened that I'll never forget. It was around 3 a.m., and I was sitting at the desk, doing my usual rounds when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I checked the security monitor, I saw a man stand outside the door. He was dressed in a dark suit, his hat pulled low over his face. He was looking down, not at the camera, just staring at the ground. I buzzed him in, thinking he was just a visitor or a late-night worker. But when the elevator doors opened, I froze. The man was standing in the lobby, right where the elevator usually lets people out. His back was turned to me, and he was just standing there, motionless. I asked, "Can I help you, sir?" But he didn't respond. I walked toward him, and the closer I got, the more I felt something was wrong. There was an unsettling stillness to him. I tried again, this time louder. "Sir, can I help you with something?" Still nothing. He didn't even twitch. He was like a mannequin, perfectly still. At this point, I felt my heart rate increase. I turned to grab the phone and call the building manager, but when I looked back, he was gone. I checked the camera, the hallways, the elevator. Nothing. No sign of anyone. I even went up to the tenants' floors to see if someone was playing a prank, but no one knew anything about it. The strangest part? The next morning, one of the tenants mentioned seeing the same man at the elevator, exactly where I had seen him hours before. He said the man had asked about the building's history, then just vanished. But the thing is, I never saw him leave. I don't know what happened that night, but I'll never forget the feeling of watching that man stand in the lobby, waiting for something or someone, and never moving. Story 2. The Late Night Caller. I've worked as a doorman for a small building downtown, and one thing I can tell you is that things get very quiet at night. You get the occasional late-night delivery or a tenant coming home after a long day. But other than that, it's just the sound of the building settling, the hum of the elevators. But one night, I received a call that made my skin crawl. It was just past midnight when the phone rang. I picked it up, expecting it to be the usual, maybe a wrong number or someone asking about the building. But when I answered, there was nothing but static on the other end. At first, I thought maybe the line was faulty, so I said, "Hello? Can I help you?" There was a long pause, and then, faintly, I heard a voice. It was quiet, raspy, almost like someone whispering from a long distance away. "Let me in," the voice said. I was taken aback. "Who is this?" I asked, but there was no answer, only silence. I checked the building's entry system, but no one had buzzed in. I looked around the lobby, expecting to see someone standing there, but no one was there. I waited, thinking maybe it was just a prank call, but then the voice came again. "Let me in." This time, it was louder, clearer, almost like it was right next to me. My heart raced as I looked at the entryway camera, the hallways outside. But again, There was no one. The building was empty, the lights off, and the only sound was the buzz of the phone in my hand. I didn't know what to do. I thought about calling the police, but I couldn't explain it. It sounded so real, but I couldn't see anything. I hung up the phone and made sure all the doors were locked, double-checked the cameras. But then, just as I was about to return to my station, I heard it, the soft sound of footsteps outside the door. I walked toward the entrance, my breath caught in my throat. I peered through the small window next to the door, but there was no one there. The street was empty, no movement, but the footsteps kept coming, slow, deliberate, as if someone was standing just on the other side, waiting. I backed away, heart pounding, not knowing what to make of it. The footsteps stopped abruptly, and just like that, everything went silent again. I stayed at my post for the rest of the night, too terrified to leave. The phone never rang again, and I never saw anyone outside. But the feeling stayed with me, the feeling that someone had been right there, just on the other side of the door, waiting for me to let them in. Story 3. The mirror on the wall. I've worked as a doorman in a high-rise for years, and let me tell you, some nights are weirder than others. But there's one night I'll never forget, no matter how hard I try. It was a typical evening. I was on duty, sitting at my station, waiting for the usual shift to pass by. The building was quiet, and most tenants were home by now, tucked in for the night. Nothing unusual, at least that's what I thought. I was doing my rounds when I passed by an old and used service room on the lower floor. It's not a place I normally go, but tonight, for some reason, I felt compelled to check it. As I pushed the door open, the familiar scent of dust and old furniture hit me. It looked like any other storage room. Old cleaning supplies, some forgotten chairs, a few boxes. But there was something in the corner that stopped me in my tracks. A mirror. It wasn't a large one, but it was old, with a wooden frame that looked out of place among the other items. It was placed on the wall as though it had always been there, but I couldn't remember seeing it before. Curiosity got the better of me, so I walked over and took a closer look. That's when I saw it. I was standing there, looking into the mirror, when I noticed something strange. My reflection wasn't matching my movements. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, but when I moved my arm, my reflection didn't follow right away. It moved just a fraction of a second after me. And that wasn't all. The reflection in the mirror looked wrong. My face, but not quite. The eyes were darker, almost hollow, and the smile didn't reach the eyes. It was an eerie, unsettling version of myself. I stepped back, my heart pounding, but the reflection didn't move. It stayed there, staring back at me, its eyes following my every movement. I reached out toward the mirror, my fingers brushing against the cold surface. And that's when I saw it, just beyond the reflection. In the dark corner of the mirror, there was a figure, a shadow, standing behind me. I spun around, but there was no one there. The room was empty. I turned back to the mirror, but the figure was gone. My reflection was normal again, just me, breathing and blinking, looking as I should, but the chill that ran down my spine stayed with me. I couldn't explain what happened that night. I checked the security cameras, but there was nothing, no sign of anyone entering or leaving the room, no signs of tampering. I thought I might have imagined it, that the fatigue from my long hours had caught up with me. But every time I pass that room now, I can't help but glance at the mirror, and sometimes, just sometimes, I could swear I see something in the reflection watching me. Story 4. The Shadow in the Hallway. I had worked the night shift at a local museum for over a year. The job was simple enough. walk the halls, keep an eye on the exhibits, and make sure nothing was out of place. The museum itself was old, full of relics and artifacts from a time long gone. It wasn't unusual for me to spend hours walking alone through the dark hallways, surrounded by paintings and sculptures. But one night, something changed. It started out as a quiet evening, the usual routine. I checked the security cameras, made sure the doors were locked, and did a sweep of the main hall. Everything was fine until I passed the old wing. That's where the artifacts from ancient civilizations were kept. The room was dark, and the air felt colder than the rest of the building. But I thought nothing of it. I always felt a strange chill in that part of the museum, but it wasn't until later that I realized why. I was walking past the hallway when I saw it. A shadow. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, a flicker from the overhead lamps. But as I walked closer, the shadow shifted. It wasn't a natural shadow, not like the ones cast by the lamps. This one was darker, deeper, and it seemed to move on its own, sliding across the floor like a figure in the dark. I stopped dead in my tracks. I stared at the shadow, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It didn't belong there. It wasn't a reflection of anything, and there was no one else in the building. The security cameras didn't show anything unusual. Just me, walking alone. I took a few steps forward, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. But when I got closer to where the shadow had been, it was gone. I felt a cold sweat on the back of my neck. But I didn't want to let it get to me. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe a trick of the light. Maybe my imagination. But the next night, it happened again. This time, I was standing near the ancient artifacts when I saw out of the corner of my eye a figure, a shadow, standing just beyond the doorway. It wasn't a person. It was more like a shape, a dark figure that seemed to melt into the darkness. I couldn't see its face, but I knew it was watching me. I called out, but it didn't move. It just stood there frozen, watching. My heart raced as I reached for my radio. But when I turned back to look at the figure, it was gone, just vanished. I ran to the hallway, but there was nothing. No sign of anyone, no footsteps, no movement. I checked the security cameras again, but they showed nothing, just the empty hallway. As usual, no trace of the shadow. No sign of anyone entering or leaving. The thing that bothered me the most wasn't the shadow itself. It was the feeling, the overwhelming sense that something was in the museum with me, something ancient, something that had been there long before I ever stepped foot in that building. I tried to tell my supervisor, but he laughed it off. "It's just the building settling," he said. "You're fine. Nothing's going on." But I know what I saw, and every time I walk past that hallway now, I can feel that someone or something is watching me from the shadows, waiting,